Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we gonna light it up. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we gonna light it up.
Hello, everyone. Today's a rough one because we're talking about very sad things. Today is the Transgender Day of Remembrance. For anybody who isn't familiar, this was a tradition that started in 1999 when people held a memorial for trans people who had died the previous year, 2 trans people specifically, in Boston and San Francisco. And it was because it was a cross-continental event, it gained a little extra notoriety, as well as the people who had died specifically. And as violence against the trans community has continued to escalate, especially over the last few years, it's become increasingly important to take a moment to reflect on the people that we've lost to hatred, to bigotry, to nationalist Christianity run amok, and other forms of extremism. Let us not forget that there are still many countries in the world where being any flavor of LGBTQ gets you unalived, sometimes by act of law, sometimes because it's completely overlooked by the law. We can't sustain a society this way, to say nothing of the egregious human rights violations. And I realize that politicians today like to say human rights violations so that they don't have to talk about the horrible things being done to people and could be done to any other person. Because if you live in a country where it's okay to murder someone because of what kind of person they are, then it's okay to murder you too because of what kind of person you are. That doesn't work. That's horrific for the victims, but it's horrific for everyone else too. So we set aside some time today to make a point of talking about this, what it means, what's been happening, and what else we can do. So this year is hard, and I'll explain why. This is the Human Resource Commission paper on violence against trans people from 2024. They've put out one of these every year for over a decade. The issue is there isn't one this year. They couldn't produce one because so much of the necessary information isn't available. We live in the United States, a country of government censorship. If the state media doesn't report a person as transgender, you'll never know. You'll have no way of finding out. So while we do have partial information about those lost this past year, people that were too public to hide or people whose information was indisputable, just a few days ago, we lost a TikToker named Girl Lala. Names be names. But yeah, she was a Black trans woman who was murdered by her boyfriend, which is one of the more common ways for a trans person to go. If it isn't someone who's very obvious, both gone and trans, you'll never find out that they were trans. So it's hard to get accurate information. It's hard to get solid information. But we do still know of a few people specifically from this past year. One in specific I want to talk about is Eliza Shoup. Now, I had some general notes of what I wanted to say. Erin Reed from Erin in the Morning puts it a little better, so I'll just read what she's got. Eliza Shoup was a transgender veteran and former detransitioner who was exploited by people eager to weaponize her story against all transgender people. In early 2021, she reached out to me and several other journalists with a landmark revelation. She held 2,600 emails from some of the most influential figures in anti-trans politics and was preparing to retransition while exposing the coordinated plan to ban gender-affirming care nationwide. Those emails became some of the clearest evidence linking far-right nationalist Christians to the founders of pseudoscience groups like SEGEM, revealing the playbook those actors used to launder religious ideology into public policy. Eliza also struggled under the very system that she helped to expose. Transgender veterans routinely face barriers accessing gender-affirming care and basic support. In the current administration, those struggles have only deepened. Become completely unavailable, with transgender service members targeted for removal from the military and veterans threatened with losing their care altogether. Quote, "I don't want to be buried anywhere on American soil. I don't want any military honors or ceremonies to mark my death. I don't want my ashes to be stored on American soil," she wrote in her suicide note. "My death as a member of the third gender and transgender population does not mean you won. You cannot erase non-binary and transgender people because you give birth to more of us each day." In January, late January, Eliza Shoup took her own life while draped in a transgender flag in the Syracuse VA parking garage. That's Syracuse Veterans Administration, not Syracuse, Virginia. It was here in New York, just a few miles from me. just a few miles from where, in the other direction, the body of Sam Nordquist was found after he'd been tortured for a month until he died. All to celebrate the inauguration of the orange asshole. That's why Eliza did what she did. Because of that inauguration, she knew what was coming. She'd seen the emails. She knew the agenda that was planned out. I have very mixed feelings about Miss Shoup because she did do a lot of damage to the transgender movement when she allowed herself to be used as a pawn. She was the first military service member to receive federal recognition as a non-binary person. She made the military recognize her. And then she turned around and tried to stab us all in the back for money and clout. Though, to her credit, once she realized that she was being used and that her life was no longer under her own control, she took steps to retransition and fuck them over in turn. So I have very mixed feelings. She did go through a redemption arc, and she made her death a symbol. She made her death an alarm flag, a warning flare of what was about to happen. And she was right. The end of January wasn't just a time where Eliza took her own life and Sam was being murdered. That was the same time that I was attacked too. Because they were coming for every single one of us they could find. It didn't work in my case. I was in the hospital for 3 days and doctors put my insides mostly back together, though I still need a reconstructive surgery or two to make things function correctly, but that's for some other time, maybe. The point is, there's a lot more of us in the US this year than at any time in recorded history because of this administration. But also, we know of fewer than almost any time in recorded history because of this administration. Which makes it even more important, I think, to remember the people that we know about and be aware of all the people that we don't know about. Now, I'm not going to read every single name because we do know of over 50 of them. A little bit about Gerlala. She was 21 years old. Now, this is from Yahoo Canada, because in order to get accurate news, I have to get it from outside the United States. She was a TikToker. I haven't been able to find her original TikTok channel. It appears to have been either deleted or taken over by a relative posting stuff in her memory and having deleted her original stuff. I don't know. But yeah, if you search for her on TikTok, you'll find nothing but people talking about her death or reposting tribute videos about her. Which is a damn shame, because everybody's making money off of her death, but nobody can find her own words to know what she said when she was still with us. Everyone is talking so loudly, trying to get their bit of cash off of the controversy of her death, no one can hear what she had to say. She's been silenced in every conceivable way. In the literal sense, by her boyfriend, who has been arrested and is being charged with first-degree murder, even in Florida. But in the metaphorical sense, too, because in the rush to talk about the controversy, Everyone has spoken over her so loudly that you can't even find her words if you look for them. And that's kind of fucked up. Times of India goes into it a little bit more. She was 21 years old, Lauderdale Lakes, shot by her boyfriend. There was, see, here's another story talking about her death. But there's very, very little about her life. There's people talking about her, but nothing from her. CNN has collected a few people out of the. I should say this first. The advocates for trans equality have put together a 2025 Remembrance report, and because there's only partial information available, they could only put on the list the people that they know about. Oh, let's see. Where's the number? 58 known trans people. There are so many of us who can't even come out of the closet at this point, or who are stealth or whatever. Known trans people since last November. 27 due to violence. And again, this is just the people who actually died. It still upsets me considerably that I could have been one of them. It very well could be someone else reporting on me right now. And it's upsetting. I mean, it's upsetting to me because fuck. 27 lost to violence, 21 to suicide, one of each on either side of me. The report also honors 8 trans people who passed from natural causes. The data in the report has been compiled from a variety of sources, including national and local news outlets, national, state, and local LGBTQI+ organizations, and volunteer-led community efforts. Quote, the report is not just a record of loss. It's a call to action. Every name represents a life that mattered. They were artists, dancers, writers, computer scientists, students, parents, friends, and so much more. The work to end anti-trans violence begins with honoring the truth that trans people deserve to be seen in their full humanity and live long, safe, and authentic lives. It's a quote from Bahari Thomas, the director of public education at the Advocates for Trans Equality. Unfortunately, this Trans Day of Remembrance report is almost certainly incomplete. Violence against the trans community, particularly of trans women of color, is vastly underreported, and accurate data is difficult to capture. Of the 27 recorded violent deaths this year, 63% were Black trans women, a devastating reminder of the disproportionate violence that continues to impact Black trans communities. All too often, law enforcement, media, and family members misidentify or refuse to acknowledge the true name and gender of trans people lost to violence. The controversy surrounding the death of Nex Benedict comes to mind, where people put so much more vitriol into whether Nex was trans or only non-binary, which is also trans, or just deny it altogether, than caring about the fact a child was killed because of a hateful, illegal school policy put into place by a criminal. Not him, the other one, the Oklahoma guy. Even when trans people are accurately named, media reports often fail to capture the fullness of their humanity, their joy, their creativity, their families, the communities they built. Like Girl Ala, there's nothing left of her except other people trying to get their clicks reporting about her. I don't know anything about her. And not about who she was, not about what she stood for, not about what she liked. I don't know if I would have liked her or disagreed with her. And that's a damn shame. Because she's gone. She's gone in the literal sense. But the record of her has been trampled by so many people trying to shout over the reality of her life. And that way it's kind of a double tragedy. Okay, we can look at the report. Oh, I already had it open. I am a silly, silly bean. Anyhow, we're not going to go through the whole thing. There's too many people. Miss Major, Lady Java, a couple of very important people in the years gone by, past this past year. Miss Major, she's been active in the community. She's for those of you not familiar, there are a few very, very big names in trans lore. Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera. Miss Major is one of those names. She's gotten a little bit less press over the years, partly because she's on the other coast, and a lot of trans activism for a long time was Boston and New York. But she got things started before Stonewall. There's so many people, even GSM groups, who think everything started at Stonewall. Even within the community, people don't want to learn the damn history. No, Stonewall was a major event, but it wasn't the first major event. But that's stuff for another time. Miss Major also was the director of the TGI Justice Project, which strengthens trans, intersex, and gender variant people for the fight against imprisonment, police violence, racism, and poverty, and seeks to create a world rooted in gender justice. Today, her ideological daughters carry on the work all across the country. The film Major and the book Miss Major Speaks, Conversations with a Black Trans Revolutionary, both carry her indomitable spirit forward to inspire new generations. Lady Java took part in a 1967 protest, 2 years before Stonewall, when she fought against the Los Angeles cross-dressing laws, which forbade her from working as a trans performer. And that was a major step towards LGBTQI plus civil rights. It also didn't stop her from leading a shining performance career throughout the 1960s, 70s, and in the 2010s, she reemerged so that her story could be known, because people were forgetting. Like I said, a lot of people, they just don't know the damn history. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, there's a lot of history I don't know because no one talks about it. I have to dig it up, like Kip going to the desert and digging the Dead Sea Scrolls out of caves. I have to go find it because it isn't available anywhere. We do what we can. I will note once again that the knowledge, the information that I do manage to amass, I put in one centralized location. This website, it isn't just to be my link tree. That's the front page, all my assorted links and stuff. It's also all my research in gender, science, intersex stuff, and assorted other things. Like there's a lot of fucking science here, but also resources. When I come across groups, organizations, and other things that people might find useful. For example, the Digital Transgender Archive. It doesn't contain all of our history, but it does contain quite a lot. And You can search by topic, by location. There's a lot that they're missing because not everything got digitized. Not everything lasted long enough to be digitized, and they don't have everything that's been digitized, but they do have a lot of very interesting stuff. So if you want to go digging, that's a good place. If you want to know what is known, that's a good place to start. Just don't assume that's all there is. But I digress. Wait, I was on this iteration of the page. I have too many tabs open, as often happens. So yeah, they both of these elders passed this past year. At least it wasn't violent. At least they got to what do you call it when it isn't violent? That concept isn't even in my head anymore, which is a little disturbing. Like, it's a foregone conclusion for me that me and everyone I know will meet their ends violently. There just isn't another way, you know? And that's a little troubling. In any case, here's some of the stuff from the archive, right? Digital Transgender Archive is where this photo's from. And this is a pride parade in 1994. It's not that long ago, but it's long enough ago that a lot of people weren't even alive for it. So, you know, and we've got the names of some of the individuals. It's a trans man group marching in a pride parade. And they're very clearly men. Like, it's just kind of cool, you know? Contrary to what Helen Joyce has to say, there is a long history of trans people creating our own media. It's so weird that in an age where people realize the creators of The Matrix were trans, that Helen Joyce is like, well, trans people can only produce ugly things. Yeah, there's some ugliness in The Matrix, but that's part of its beauty too, because it show. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to get into a breakdown of the literary symbolism in a movie. Not right now. Maybe another time. I'm looking for the names of specific people who passed this past year because I understand. I mean, there's a lot to be said. The attacks on our lives, both literally and legislatively, have to end. We cannot go on this way. But that's not what I'm looking for at the moment. They made a chart that doesn't work. That's not awesome. Well, this appears to have data on it that for some reason isn't showing up. 61% of suicides were between 15 and 24. Okay, who is on this list? Apparently, it's just gathered information, and they include they're including intersex people as well, which is, I mean, I get it because gender variance, because if you the American system is so bloody stupid. It's like if you presume that there's only man and woman and that they're based on male and female, then an intersex person is also a trans person, even if they only identify as intersex. It's so ridiculous. C'est la vie. Yeah, there's a lot more that could be said. I was hoping to have some names because I knew some of them would be very, very important, but apparently no one has a list of names. So we'll go back to the CNN report because they did manage to put together some names. Tahiri Broom. This person. She could show up anywhere, from a seat at a church service to a night club's pulsing dance floor, armed with her long painted nails, shimmery eyeshadow, and colorful wigs. Then, like magic, the whole place would belong to her. And Patricia Bender would most likely be there too, watching proudly. Bender's to Harry Broom's aunt, but the two grew up more like siblings. With only 5 years between them, Bender and Broom spent their days in Cleveland, practically inseparable. When you saw me, you saw her, Bender said. Bender said she loved Broom's fearlessness. Broom taught her to walk into the room like you own it, every time. Broom was outspoken, always standing 10 toes down for anyone or anything she believed in ever since she was a kid. She was a social butterfly who could make fun out of nothing. I'm having low-key nostalgia because it reminds me of me as a kid. I was never bored as a child. I could turn literally anything into fun. And I was very preoccupied with concepts of justice and fairness. That was my tism. But when I perceived something was unfair or wrong, I stood up to people, regardless of how big or how old they were compared to me. One time I've mentioned before, but for those of you who weren't around for it, I was somewhere around 8 or 9 years old, and my father came home drunk, as he often did, and he tried to take it out on my mother. And so I threw him through the fucking front door, and he spent the night out on the lawn, and we needed a new front door. Again, I grew up on a farm. I was very strong. But also leverage. If you have a drunk, heavy person and you are almost exactly half their height, flipping them over their shoulder, over your shoulder, turns their weight into momentum. You don't have to be that strong, you know? You see what I'm saying? In any case, she was outgoing, she loved everybody, and they loved her back. Going 1 to 2 weeks without hearing from her wasn't a cause for concern because she was independent and tended to mind her own business. But in February, Bender's phone began to ring and ring and ring and ring, and she hesitated to answer, sensing there may be bad news on the line. Sometimes your phone rings and it rings different, Bender said. When she finally answered her cousin's FaceTime call, she saw their rosy cheeks and tear-stained faces, and she felt numb. Broom, who had been visiting Southfield, Michigan at the time, had been shot and killed less than a month before her 30th birthday. My little brother, my nephews, my male cousins, I worry about them. They'll be outside doing only God knows what, Bender said. Tahiri? Nobody worries about Tahiri. A suspect in Broom's death has been charged with second-degree murder and remains in custody awaiting a trial date, according to Southfield police. Hearing of an arrest in Broom's case was a calming feeling for Bender, but getting her justice would involve the suspect being in a cell for the rest of his life, she said. She and her family members keep up with the case by regularly attending the suspect's Zoom hearings. Researchers and advocacy groups say Black trans women like Broom are disproportionately impacted. Of the 372 trans victims identified by Human Rights Watch between 2013 and 2024, the last year for which reliable data is available, 73% were women of color. 60% were Black women. Bender is still Broom's yin and yang, her frickin' frack. Her niece might have thought introducing her to the local LGBTQ scene, being older and being her auntie, made Bender Broom's savior. But Broom, Bender said, saved her too. I may be helping you in a sense, or exposing you to this, and I'm helping you live your truth, she added. And the whole time, you think you need me, but the whole time, I needed you more. Carmen Wells, a Detroit ballroom legend whose walk rivaled Naomi Campbell. For those of you who aren't familiar, Naomi Campbell started as a model. She eventually did movies and things, but yeah. The walking wonder of Detroit's queer ballroom scene, a nightlife runway legend whose hip-twisting strut is rumored to have put Naomi Campbell to shame. She wouldn't hit the runway in anything less than 6-inch heels, and a jangle of jewelry and sharp clack of heels announced her presence almost everywhere she went. She was Carmen Wells, nothing more and nothing less. Quote, "Her style can't be mimicked ever again," said her aunt, Markeitha Bibb. When she came in, they knew what it is. They knew she was going to take the stage. The 37-year-old was a staple of the local ballroom community, a historic queer subculture where performers compete in categories that include modeling, dancing, and voguing. Often, live broadcasting, folks. My mouth doesn't want to do this. I'm having a very hard time keeping things together internally. I'm enough of a performer, I'm managing it, but it's very hard. Often, performers compete as members of a house, a chosen family that can provide support systems that biological families sometimes cannot. Wells had worked the stage for years, eventually earning the status of legend. And becoming the mother of the Detroit chapter of the internationally renowned House of Revlon. Monica Hudson met Wells when she was still a teenager. Hudson had been doing LGBTQ community outreach at the city's Palmer Park when she came across Wells and was instantly charmed by her witty sense of humor. Quote, "Our interaction was so real and so raw and authentic. She ended up becoming my chosen daughter," Hudson said. When Wells was killed on May 25th, Hudson said it felt like losing a part of myself. Wells was shot to death in her home just days before her 38th birthday. Police say the suspect has not been identified or charged. The world lost a talented, funny, loving, caring, hardworking hustler. The world has lost a gem. People don't even know the people that they've lost. They don't even know the people until after they're gone. That troubles me greatly. There've been people in my life that I would have liked to know, but I didn't even know they were there until after they were gone. That bothers me a lot sometimes. It bothers me a lot to think about my own future, too. Call me a prophet if you want, but I will make this prophecy now. A whole hell of a lot more people will suddenly care about me and my story after I'm gone. Because caring about living people is inconvenient. It means doing things. It means taking action. It means getting involved. And it means letting the person speak. Dead people are much more handy because you can say things about them. You can twist their narrative to whatever your agenda is, and you never have to worry about them correcting you. Call me cynical. I've seen it happen a few times. Point is, people get a whole lot more popular after they're no longer inconveniently able to talk. Leah Smith, you may have heard this name. Student in New England. For her parents, Leah Smith's birth was a dream come true, albeit a little nerve-wracking. Born early at just over 31 weeks and under 4 pounds. That struck a nerve. Smith arrived just minutes before her twin, a fact she would later point out with pride to her baby sister. Her father, Greg Smith, camped out at the NICU for weeks until he and his husband, Keith, were able to take the babies home to meet their other child. We were just thrilled beyond belief, Greg Smith said. Smith grew into a healthy child and a young adult who was deeply empathetic, intrinsically curious, and very hardworking, her father said. She filled her days learning piano and trombone, going to swim practice, poring over books on world history, and playing board games and cards with her family. Exceptional with numbers and problem solving, she eventually learned how to count cards and maximize her odds of winning. I remember learning how to do that. It's interesting. The kids always learn the gambling tricks before they're legal to gamble, you might say. Over time, I learned to only play games of pure chance with her if I wanted to win, Smith said at his daughter's memorial service earlier this month. Simply put, she was smarter than me. Diving became a core part of her existence, he said. At age 8, Smith began training with Stanford's youth swim program, and by the time she'd left home for college, her bedroom walls were decorated with hundreds of competition ribbons. Though she was recruited by several colleges to compete on their men's teams, she was delighted to be invited to compete on the women's team at Middlebury College in Vermont, her father said. It would be the first time she would compete on a team that aligned with her gender. After her first year at Middlebury, Smith stopped competing in diving, but continued to practice with the team. She was really more focused on being one of the girls, Smith said. It was very affirming, and mostly she just wanted to hang out with them and practice. This year, Smith returned to Middlebury as a senior, working towards degrees in statistics and computer science. The 21-year-old was somehow able to find time to pursue other interests as well. She loved to debate the history of Japan or think about the intricacies of China. She had a keen and eclectic interest, and it made it always fun and interesting to talk to her. Though she loved to spend time with family and friends, she was at the core an introvert. In her cherished private moments, she would read, sit down at the piano, or write poetry, which she rarely shared. While Leah was deeply loved, her father Greg said at her memorial that she lived on a daily basis with the quiet whispers of judgment and the furrowed brows of contempt. Last month, Leah was reported missing. After a days-long search, her body was found near the college campus. She had died by apparent suicide. Leah did not leave a note explaining why, but her father noted that she had felt the brunt of cultural backlash against transgender people, a feeling he said was only exacerbated by online harassment and a parade of restrictions on transgender people under the Trump administration. Over time, I believe the relentless negativity exhausted her, he said. Which is absolutely the point. That is the actual point. That is the plan for extermination. Is to exhaust us and burn us out until we can't take it anymore. And I must confess, I've had thoughts leaning in that direction increasingly as the year has gone on. Like, there have been tough times before. There's always haters. There's always bigots. There's always jackasses just trying to be hurtful. That's true no matter who you are, although having any kind of minority status puts a target on your back, as it were. But it was only this year that things changed, where the hate became less, ha ha, I made you cry, and more, we're coming for you. Possibly it has something to do with the fact that people actually fucking came for me. At least one person. Also, the whole being driven out of my job thing. It's exhausting. In the old days, I could rely on my anger to get me through periods of sadness. When I noticed that I was getting too upset, I was getting too much dark emotion, I could take that dark emotion, convert it into anger, and then burn the anger. Sometimes I could do something constructive with it. I could hatefully paint. I could furiously photograph a landscape, It was weird, but it worked. And once I burned off the anger, then I could use music or something to transition myself back into a normal mood. It was all about just adjusting your feelings, translating from one to another until you're stabilized again. I can't do that anymore. Anger doesn't work the same way. Most curiously. Nonetheless, we persist, at least for now. Hundreds of people attended the memorial services at Middlebury and at Smith's High School, her father said. He was stricken by the infinite love shared at the services and the outpouring of support he has received from strangers online. She was perfect for us in every way, he said. We cherished her, and others did too. And that's the end of her story. That's all there is. Her story's over. And there's so many other people on this list. Like I said, we can't go through every name. Sam Nordquist. I didn't know him. I didn't even know he was in the area. He was from out of state. He came here to visit someone. A gang of 5 people got their hands on him. I don't know how. I don't know where they kept him. Like, how do you hold a person for a month? They tortured him until he died. Cincinnati, Laura Schuler. Dream Johnson. Great name. As you may be aware, a lot of trans people pick our own names when we transition. Sometimes we have them assigned to us by someone else. That's all there is for that. Even though we only have a partial list, there's so fucking many. And I realize this is a somber topic. It's extremely difficult. It's difficult for me as well, obviously. I believe it or not, I am doing my best to liven things up a bit. It's just not in the cards for this particular subject to be lighthearted, So thank you for joining today, because this stuff is important. It matters because lives are literally at stake. We just saw some of them lost because of people not thinking it matters. So I very much appreciate you being here. For the sake of various reasons that I don't care to enumerate at the moment, I thought it might be valuable to re-review something that we covered quite some time ago. Partly because I have new information that past Ember didn't have. And so it would be sort of like reviewing this thing with my past self. Although I must caveat that that's a difficult prospect for me. I'm not really very comfortable with my past self. It's better than it was, but it's not great because I'm keenly aware of all the dysphoria past Ember is feeling and suppressing. And I remember being there, and it's difficult. Now, we originally covered this because it was important, but again, I've learned a lot since then, and also for the sake of visibility, which is the entire reason I did my transition publicly on live videos over all these years, was to show people what it's like, that we do exist, that we're real, that it's normal, that you can talk to us, you can ask us questions, that this is a thing that other people can do too if it's right for them, or at least learn about it. It's visibility matters. And so for that same reason, I think this matters. And also because I know more, I feel like Past Ember did a really good job with this review, but I feel like there's still stuff I can add. So let's give it a shot and see what happens.
Howdy, folks. Today we're going to be looking at an anti-trans propaganda film by Epoch TV called Gender Transformation. It's a bit of a long one, so we're going to get right into it, but first, a heads up. This film deals with some difficult topics, including gaslighting, victim blaming, several kinds of assault, and unaliving. If you're not in a headspace to handle these topics, take care of yourself. You can always come back and watch this another time, or contact me and we can discuss things in a more user-friendly environment. This is a hard one for me too, as you'll see as the film goes on, but it's really, really important. Now let's get to it. And as always, thank you so much for watching and being part of this community.
My name is Kali Fontania, and I am a former public school teacher of 15 years.
What do we think, folks? There's a reason I wore this dress tonight, and it's not just because it's a trans dress that I designed myself and I'm super proud of. It's the one blinding signal to anyone who knew what they were looking for that I was trans long before any talk of coming out ever approached. But it's also significant as far as other transformations, come to think of it, because I don't want to make this show about me today. But part of what I'm trying to show today is the beauty of transition when a trans person is able to live. And part of that is this. Because look at how fucking big this is on me. It's huge. When I started to transition, I couldn't fit into this thing. I couldn't even get it on all the way. And now it's huge. Food for thought, I suppose.
Okay, Kali Fontania. Let's have a look at that. So the Exodus Institute is a homeschool program. What does that mean, though? Notice that it says fully accredited K through 12 grade online school, taught by experienced and credentialed teachers. Okay, cool. Christian values, and not great, but that happens a lot with homeschool. No political agendas.
A note The reason homeschool programs are so prevalent as they are is because of Brown versus Board of Education. Like private schools, the concept took off as a way for white people with way too much money to be able to keep their kids from having to go to school with those silly brown people. The end of segregation caused a spike in homeschooling, and every conspiracy theory and pseudoscience thing to catch on ever since has caused additional spikes, which is terrifying. But that's why religion is related, because when you disable your critical thinking about one thing, is this magical being people claim true, you become vulnerable to every other kind of nonsense. Like, moon landing denial, for one example.
Or woke indoctrination. Okay, here's their Twitter. I teach classes against communism and other leftist indoctrination at the online school I founded with my wife. Remember, no politics, no indoctrination. Here's another one. These are the kinds of lessons we give in our enrichment program. Here's Joshua with a short video that shows a dinosaur skeleton and talks about evidence of a global flood. The post goes on to say, we highlight the problems with evolution and show the evidence for creation and intelligent design. No politics, no indoctrination.
Evidence. Amazing. Now, I am going to be interrupting periodically when I have something to add. Past Ember did a fantastic job digging into all the assorted characters that rang bells. But there's people that Ember didn't even know. But I do. And there's probably more people that neither of us knows. It's fine. This entire video is available in the trans rights playlist here on, the Better Than Ember YouTube channel. There's a playlist, trans rights, it's on there. But other than that, it's unlisted because pre-transition Ember makes me extremely uncomfortable. As you can tell from the edits, this was originally a live stream. I do pretty good work on these sometimes.
This next one, the entire narrative of January 6th is a lie. No politics, no indoctrination. January 6th is a lie. At Exodus Institute, we teach students how to recognize the news media lies like this. No politics, no indoctrination. But we're going to take something that is actual fact and tell your students it is a lie, and then show them how to identify that it's a lie, but no indoctrination. No politics. March 19th, 2022. Joshua got locked out of his account for basically being a TERF, as far as I can tell. He doesn't outright say, but when people use that phrasing, the biological version of 2 + 2 = 4, yeah, you're probably being very, very transphobic, but whatever. So he got perma-banned from Facebook and TikTok and suspended on Twitter. He's on Truth Social, though, where there's no censorship of ideas, by which he means there's no accountability for hate speech. But whatever. Get your...
I mean, there can't be, because of the reason Truth Social exists and who the largest account on there happens to be. If you had any accountability for facts or hate speech, he couldn't be there. He just couldn't do the thing, bestie. He just, no, Mango Mussolini on his own website.
Kids out of these indoctrination camps. I agree. If your kid is in Exodus Institute or something like it, get them out of that indoctrination camp. Okay, let's go on.
Our public schools have changed. 5 years ago, there was no students that were identifying as non-binary. Gender fluid was not something that we even knew about.
The fact that Callie did not know about a thing does not mean that thing did not exist. Also, students not, I can't speak for her school district, but students not identifying as a thing when they don't have the terminology to describe themselves that way should not be surprising. I, as a lifelong trans person, did not have the terminology to identify myself as such when I was in school. So, of course, I did not identify myself as such using those terms I did not have.
So I should fill in some blanks here that past Ember was too uncomfortable to talk about, but I have since come to terms with. At this point, Ember was publicly identifying as non-binary because she didn't feel like it would be possible for her to transition at that point in her life, and she hadn't been able to before then. So she thought non-binary, she didn't feel as uncomfortable there. And also she was having terrors about the possibility of getting stuck somewhere in between, like starting a transition but not being able to finish, and being a horrifying monster that it was incapable for anyone to love. She still struggles with that one, but nonetheless, we have since taken some steps. Now, that's not to say that every non-binary person is at some holding pattern, some midway point where they feel less uncomfortable. There are a lot of non-binary people whose true home is as a non-binary person. But there are quite a few binary trans people who spend some time there on their way through. And neither one is invalid.
Duh.
We're also having an epidemic of
Dade must have wandered in at some point here and was like, it was a little uncanny how the person with the beard sounded incredibly like Ember. How dare you? I have spent over 2 years trying to get this voice to not sound like that voice. I mean, I could see how we're like similarly attired. I do actually still have that hat, but the pin that's on that hat is now on this hat. I almost wore this hat for this show, but this hat fit better because, like, I mean, I like this hat, but this hat worked. But yeah, you get what I mean.
girls transitioning more than boys.
Okay, that's going to vary from area to area. The best information I was able to find is linked in the description. It's a decades-long study of a gender clinic where they had thousands of people go through. And TLDR on that one, they found that roughly twice as many people transitioned from male to female than from female to male. But again, this district that Callie's talking about may be different.
A lot of
Needless to say, it's been more than 2 years since this video. Whatever the fuck past Ember was talking about is not linked in the description of this video. But if that's a references, all the references over here, betterthanember.com on the gender science page. We've got trans biology science. We've got some of the fucking sports myth. There's a whole section about that. Trans youth science. That's a new section today. I separated out the youth science and added a bunch more stuff yesterday. So there's more there, but yeah, it's there. It is on the website. There's sections, all the things. Any reference that I still use is on this website in case y'all need it, because it's there for people to use and things. Dade's been a member for a month. Hooray! Appreciate that. Dade, of course, is a member at the match level, which means he's got access to all the fun custom emojis. There's a bunch, and they're voted on by members mostly. I've recently begun replacing a few that never get used with people who have frequently co-hosted on this channel, such as Mark Reed, Kelly King, and Liliball Trades, for instance. And of course, there's an Ember emoji. Anyway, at match level, you get the emojis. That's what they're for. At higher levels, you get those plus more stuff. But yay, whatever, however you want to support the channel, I appreciate it. It helps more than you might think. And also, Dade sends us a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Dade. And says, excuse me, take my money. Why, thank you. I appreciate that too. I really, really do. It's rough out there, folks. Shoot. I need to do this properly. Maya, is it? Thank you, Dade.
The children and teenagers and high schoolers that are questioning their gender and having gender identity crisis are being driven by the teachers.
Being driven by the teachers. Okay, first of all, citation needed, but also remember that, because that story is going to change later on.
I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of parents.
This is Aaron Friday. Who the heck?
Praise Jeebus that Past Ember knows who the fuck this is, because, like, all the red flags and alarms just went off. Past Ember's going to tell you more, but all the red flags. This woman tortured her child for years on purpose because it's the trans people that are at issue. She brags about torturing her own child, but it's the trans people who are an issue. Fuck. Go ahead, Past Ember.
Heck is Aaron Friday? Well, I am glad you asked. She is an anti-transgender extremist. She's like a TERF on steroids. She's affiliated with an anti-trans group called Our Duty. She was a practicing lawyer, but when her child, which we know very little about, according to Friday, we only get her side of the story on this. After public schools gave her education, the child began identifying as pansexual, then non-binary, then transmasculine around 2020. In response, Aaron Friday quit her job and started a multi-year campaign to isolate the child. She took the child out of school. She broke off all of the kids' friendships, took away internet, phone, basically locked the child in a little box. The child ran away. When that wasn't sufficient, shipped the child off to be with out-of-state relatives who had no access or contact to anything, and eventually resorted to sending the child to work camps. And according to her, and this is a quote, "I sent her to camps where she would have to do physical work all day long." According to Friday, the child eventually desisted in 2022. She tortured this child for years until she finally gave up. Awesome parenting.
I wish I had.
She also, in addition to running Unknown Hate Group, spends a great deal of time traveling the country to testify before courts and state legislatures to lie about trans people, which, according to her child isn't. Amazing. For instance, she testified about some bills proposed in North Dakota, where she said, quote, "I'm the parent of a daughter who at age 11 was convinced she was a trans boy. She did not come by this belief organically. She was indoctrinated by her sex ed class." Indoctrinated by a sex ed class. She's testified in a bunch of different places. She lives in California, just to be clear. She's not from North Dakota. She traveled to give this testimony because she was paid to do so by the conservatives, the same conservatives that pay Chloe Cole, for example, who recently said on the stand under oath that she's paid something like $200,000 a year to travel around and testify about why being trans is horrible. Like, oh, it's a whole thing. It's a whole career, whatever. But the key thing about Aaron Friday is she tortured her child, and that she is, if not the source, one of the early rebroadcasters of the idea that they're transitioning the kids in the schools. When people wonder where the fuck Trump got that, she's one of those people.
A phone.
My mom would know.
Okay, when we get into, you can tell when we're in the fictionalized narrative because you get those little bars on the top and bottom, the cinema screen thing. This is loosely based on the story of Andrew Martinez. It's a very tragic story, and spoiler alert, it ends badly. But this is pre-transition Andrew, fictionalized as a character named Evan slash.
This is slightly trippy. Me and pre-transition Ember are reviewing a film about a fictionalized version of a pre-transition trans man who has died and whose story has been turned into what the filmmakers thought was anti-trans propaganda, but in actuality makes the opposite point. It shows the danger of this anti-trans propaganda. It shows the inevitable result of this nationalist, demented version of Christianity's ideology, the inevitable outcome of it. The natural result, you might say, or perhaps the intended result. Now, again, this video is very, very long. The whole thing you can watch straight through in the Trans Rights playlist. And this is the edited down version from the live stream. I used to do very long lives. We're not going to do the whole thing. I just want to make a few points and probably jump to the end to show why all this matters.
Evelyn. And we're taking that element from Aaron's story and incorporating it into the narrative. This, my mom wouldn't let me have a phone. And this is where things start to change a little bit, and you'll see why shortly.
Never allow it.
Yeah, she's so weird for that.
I mean, she thinks I'd get distracted.
So today we're gonna talk a bit about genders. You know, the term gender identity, it was coined by psychiatrist Professor Robert J. Stoller in 1964. And
that is true as far as it goes. Robert Stoller coined the term. But again, the terms we use today are the labels we put on things, the nouns we assign to stuff to facilitate easy communication. That does not mean the ideas that we now define as gender identity are brand new or, 100 years old, as the case may be. Stoller was affiliated with UCLA Medical School and founded a gender clinic out there. That'll be important in a second. But he's not the first. He's the first to talk about it as a psychologist or psychiatrist. He's the first to coin the term. But we see evidence of gender identity being separate from biological sex going back all through history. In the early 1900s in Germany.
Right. As long as humans have had the ability to categorize other humans into men, women, and other, whatever word they used for it in their language, as long as we've been able to make those categories, there have been people who've said, I don't belong in this category. I belong in this category. And that's all being trans has ever meant, is saying, I don't fit in here, but I do fit in here. I know me better than you do, so I should be the one that gets to pick which category I'm in. And then there's the agender assholes who are like, no categories. I'm having none of your category bullshit. Which is fair, honestly.
Germany, there were clinics where a person could have gender reassignment surgery. There were, in the Weimar Republic, transgender individuals were issued a special ID card that exempted them from the cross-dressing laws that were in place at the time, because a person who was transgender would wear the clothing of the gender they were rather than the gender they were assigned at birth.
Fun fact, remember Lady Java? My brain wanted to say Miss Major. I'm like, that's not right. Lady Java, who fought against the same kinds of anti-cross-dressing laws in 1967, 22 years after the Central European nationalists were defeated, the US still had the same kinds of laws. Free country, folks.
So this was not only acknowledged, it was a thing that actually had its own ID cards. But that's not the only relevant part of history. There are documented cases going back and back and back. If you've ever heard of or care to Google a being known as Public Universal Friend, that was a non-binary individual who existed very, very publicly in, over a century ago.
1800s. I eventually did a trans people in history short about them. Fascinating character. Ended a war, negotiated a treaty, founded a town. So much cool shit. That is on the Transpositions Weekly channel, which I understand hasn't been super active recently. We're all going through some shit. But the playlist of trans people in history is still there. And you can find Public Universal Friend on that one, along with a whole bunch of other really fucking cool old-timey trans people.
And it goes further. There's a Roman emperor who is on record in the historical.
Also did a trans people in history on that person. Allegable. I can never pronounce the damn name. But yeah, we're at least one Roman emperor, but there's one that everybody's always thinking of.
Record as wanting to find a surgeon to perform a gender reassignment surgery. And there's more. I just recently did a video about transgender and non-binary genders in the Talmud, the ancient Jewish religious tradition.
That's some fascinating shit. Also, linked the website, not my video about it. But right here at the very bottom of the page, 8 genders in the Talmud. Now, it's really fascinating that if you go to that link now, it'll still take you to the correct page, but for some reason the title has changed to 7 genders in the Talmud. How peculiar. It was edited sometime this year. This article that's been up there for years got edited this year to reduce the number of genders in the Talmud, even though there's 8. Fascinating, isn't it? But I digress. Point is, you can find that article on the website also. That's what it's for, is to be able to find stuff.
There are defined terms for people who change their gender through human intervention. That's thousands.
Past Ember, of course, speaking colloquially. You change your gender presentation, not your gender identity. Language is limited.
Of years ago. That's what today we would call a post-op transgender person. And that's acknowledged in the Talmud. How much more does one need to see that this is not a thing that just happened in 1964? We have always been around, and the more primitive, ancient cultures handled it better than we are today.
And then it was popularized by psychologist John Money. He was one of the first researchers to publish theories about how societal constructs of gender
Do we have to talk about fucking hell? For shame, for shame.
influence the individual formation of gender identity.
That's important. Yes, John Money was
Maybe
an
onto
early
something.
popularizer in the field of psychology and behavior, and he published theories. But
Here's the thing Past Ember didn't know, and I'm going to let Past Ember finish, but I was not aware of the legal case of Ewan Forbes at the time. That's a whole fucking side tangent, but the general rundown is Ewan Forbes transitioned and became eligible to inherit a noble title in the UK. The Crown lost their shit. They called in the American sexologists to do the eugenicist thing and find a way out of this troubling situation. Because if it should ever come to pass that a crown prince should suddenly be a princess and removed from the line of succession, or a princess became a prince and suddenly insert into the line of succession, it could lead to civil war in the UK, and that must never be allowed. So, long story short, John Money and his cronies got involved in the legal case of Ewan Forbes, which eventually resulted in decades of de facto anti-trans laws in the UK based on case precedent that no one could access because it was sealed and secret. Shady, shady shit.
His theory was that gender was a completely social construct, and we'll see why that's important in a second.
And this is where gender affirming care comes from. In fact, the only
it is not, in fact, where gender affirming care comes from. Past Ember wouldn't know this yet, but we've been doing gender affirming care for thousands of years. What changed in the 60s was sexologists, a specific form of psychologist, inserted themselves between the patient and the endocrinologist or the urologist or whoever they were working with, possibly a team of people. Before John Money and his cronies, trans people would just go see a doctor and be like, hey, doc, I'm trans. And the doctor would be like, jolly good, have some hormones. I have to assume I wasn't around for it. And then John Money came along and was like, hold on. How can you be sure this person is really trans? Well, because there are no people who say, hey, I'm trans, I would like to transition, please change my body. There are no people who say that. But John Money and his cronies would say something like, but if you haven't studied their psychology, how can you be sure they're really trans? What the fuck do you mean, John Money? So basically, he created an entire industry out of the assumption that people who were just existing perfectly fine, accessing the available medical care as it gradually improved through time, just like everyone else does, might be mentally deficient, and created a whole industry of studying us as presumed mental deficients. Amazing, right? But the point is, the gender affirming care has always existed. It's the psychiatrists getting in between that haven't.
Study intended to prove this theory of
This is Miriam Grossman. She's gross. And I'll tell you why in a second. First of all, misleading. John Money is not where the idea of gender affirming care comes from. It's where the terms for things that have always been happening through all of human history come from. John Money put them into the literature much the same way Darwin put the ideas of evolution into the scientific zeitgeist. But it deals with things that humans have known about as long as there have been humans. John Money popularized those labels, but they're things that we have always done. But that's a whole other thing. Okay, who is Miriam Grossman?
I was muted. Past Ember makes an excellent point, an excellent comparison. Evolution, right? Darwin gets a lot of credit for writing the book about evolution, but we've always known about the concepts underlying evolution. Darwin systematized it, created a scientific model that could be tested, make predictions, and potentially be falsified. Cool, good work. But the idea of evolution, the selection of characteristics, heritable characteristics that could be passed through populations, that's how agriculture works. We've known about that since the agricultural revolution. 12,000 years. I do appreciate scholars. I really, really do, especially ones who innovate something. But let us not overpraise someone to the point that we forget humans have known things for a long time. Darwin didn't invent evolution. Newton didn't invent gravity. These sexologists didn't invent gender-affirming care.
I'll let her speak for herself for a second.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Miriam Grossman. I am a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, author, and senior fellow at Do No Harm. I have been taking care.
Do No Harm, it should be noted, is A, fake doctor group, and B, a SPLC-recognized hate group. Now, to be clear, if you're not familiar, SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, they track hate groups like the KKK, the neo-Nazis, the neo-Confederates, and so forth. And they track the same kind of groups that do the same kind of hate for the same kinds of reasons against LGBT people. So when I say Do No Harm is a hate group, it's been classified as a hate group by the same people who say the KKK is a hate group on the same authority, the same criteria, and for the same reason. It's not just a random label. It's a hate group. Just so we're clear. Meanwhile, Stop the Stupidity dropping in to gift 5 memberships. Thank you, STS. Those went to Liz Allen, My Unfinished Sock, Rainbow Ash, Al Trucker, and Leah Filius. Congratulations, folks. Do enjoy all the fun custom emojis and all the other stuff that comes with membership. Like member streams, member exclusive. There's a fuck ton of member exclusive content, including a lot of my pre-transition stuff because I'm very uncomfortable with it. But if I feel it's important, some of it's available to members. So, you know, there's that. So, yeah, but thank you, STS.
Patients for 45 years. I'm going to use my time to respond to Dr. McNamara. First, I'm struck by her use of the phrase sex assigned at birth. Sex is not assigned at birth.
It is.
Sex is established at conception, and
it isn't.
It's recognized at birth.
It isn't.
If not earlier.
I'm sure Past Ember has a really good point, but Past Ember doesn't realize she's a chimera. A fun thing about me and Past Ember, for anybody who's missed it, because I don't talk about it super often, it feels like I talk about it all the damn time, but it doesn't actually come up very often. We're merged twins, right? They're two separate fetuses, reverse twinning, fused together in the womb. Instead of splitting into twins, we merged into one. Half of my cells are XX and half of my cells are XY. When I was born, the doctors took a peek at what was between my legs to try to assign me something, and they ended up having to take a guess. As it happens, the person who filled out the paperwork guessed a different way than the person who did the surgery on an infant to make that infant look a certain way, which is why Past Ember is sporting that fantastic beard instead of these still growing but perfectly acceptable milk makers, let us say. If that doctor had chosen differently, or perhaps consulted my parents, or perhaps consulted the other doctor who wrote down on my birth certificate that I was assigned female at birth, then perhaps this would not be the Past Ember that we would see today, which I appreciate. Many of you were very fond of Past Ember. I would feel a whole hell of a lot better, though. Past Ember's insightful commentary. No, Miriam, you're wrong.
So, yes, she's immediately speaking out of her field. She is a psychiatrist. She is an author. She is not an endocrinologist. She is not an embryologist. She is not a geneticist. She is simply asserting something that is scientifically not true because she isn't working in that field. She's using her credentials to pass off her personal opinions as if they weighed as much as actual science. So, what does that actually mean? What is actually going on? Sex is assigned at birth is a somewhat problematic phrase because a person can't be assigned a sex, right? You have what you have. Even if you're an intersex person, you have what you have. But the thing about that is that in biology, there are several different ways sex is determined. Sometimes it's chromosomes, sometimes it's gamete size, sometimes it's visible external genitalia. There are 6 or 7 different ways. None of them have only 2 options, and they don't always match. So when you're assigning sex, you're actually estimating sex. You're saying, based on the information I have available right now, we're not doing karyotypes on babies, we're not checking hormone levels on babies, we're just observing the external genitalia and making a guess. So that's how sex is assigned. The same thing happens on the other end of things. When a forensic anthropologist looks at bones, there's a whole bunch of different markers, diagnostic characteristics, but you almost never end up with a skeleton that has all the markers for maleness. There's 47 different criteria, possibly more. And some of them will show up as male and some of them will show up as female, and they go to size, density. There's a bunch of different things. But nobody is textbook male or textbook female. So a forensic anthropologist makes an estimate of the probable sex of the person whose bones they are. We don't actually know. There is no tag anywhere on the human body that says this unit formed male or whatever. And once again, there's also intersex individuals, people with mutations, people with anomalies. There are so many exceptions, it would take forever just to go through all of those.
But many of the more common ones are listed on the website. Also, another thing that I keep learning about new stuff because, of course, duh, there are several burial sites with specific customs and traditions that are different for men or women. And we keep finding skeletons that show the physiological characteristics of a male or a female, but buried in the opposite fashion. And it's not just one culture, it's not just one time period. It seems to be everywhere across all of time, which is pretty fucking neat. But we keep finding like new specific ones, like a burial in what's now the Czech Republic from something like 5,000 years ago, where women are always buried facing east and men are always buried facing west. And this particular skeleton, which has like all male markers phenotypically, was buried facing east, with like the ritual objects that go with women. Like, it wasn't an accident. It was clearly done on purpose. They were honoring this person as a woman, as opposed to honoring this person as a man who had passed away. And some people propose something like, oh, well, maybe it was a gay man, and so they, to shame this person, buried that person like they would bury a woman. But they have a different thing when they want to shame you. They don't bury you with honor. That's what they do, is they stick you in a hole and don't mark it, you know?
So, Dr. Grossman is not only out of her depth, she is very, very wrong. And that was just a clip of the testimony she gave in Congress. Let's see what else she has to say.
Gender identity being separate from biology failed miserably, and that was the study that John Money did with the famous twins, the Reamer twins.
Okay, quick note on the Reamer twins.
I just want to say I really appreciate how much Past Ember does know, because while I have learned more since, Past Ember has really got this. Like, as soon as she mentioned money and the study and whatever, I knew the Reamer twins were coming. And like, I'm mentally recalling everything I know about the twins and why she's going to deliberately misrepresent the case, because the actual story demonstrates the opposite of what she's claiming it represents. But Past Ember's got this. I can rely on Past Ember to cover this. And that's pretty cool, honestly, from my point of view.
One of the twins, you know what, I'll let her introduce it, and then I'll correct her.
One of them had a accident. His penis was burnt off. His parents were at a loss of how to raise him, what to do with him. And they turned to the gender expert at the time, John Money, and John Money told them, not a problem, raise him as a girl. He's only 18 months old. He's gonna need some operations, he's gonna need some hormones, but he will be comfortable as a woman. But Money did not report that his experiment that spanned 10 years was an abysmal failure. He reported that it was a success.
Yes and no. Again, Past Ember's got this. When I go too long without saying something, I just have this instinctive worry about copyright stuff, even though it's my own. It's fine. It's fine. I'll let Past Ember address it.
Indeed. Notice that Miriam didn't say that it was an abysmal failure. She said that he did not report it was an abysmal failure. Now, how you define success is a little bit ishy, because what happened was, with those twins, accounts vary, but the most reliable information seems to be there was a problem during the circumcision, and one of them ended up losing his external genitalia. So John Money, who was recognized as an expert at the time, he ran a clinic. John Money was a proponent of the idea that gender is entirely a social construct. There's no nature to it whatsoever. So in order to test his theory and help out the child if he was right, he proposed the idea that they should raise that twin as female. Because if your body appears female and all of culture tells you you're female, then you must be a female, right? Well, not really. That child grew up and persistently throughout the course of his life understood that there was a mishmash between what they felt, what they knew about themselves, and what everyone else in the outside world was telling them. They knew that there was something wrong about what they were being told who they were is. Roughly 10 years later, that person unalived themselves. And that's why Dr. Grossman says it was a failure. But the thing of it is it straight up proved that there is an innate element, gender, that you can't just be told who you are and you're fine with it. You can't, even with, Miriam would put it as, you can't give a person surgeries and give a person hormones and have it change who they are. Well, that's true, but not in the way she thinks. You can't have a person be who you tell them they are. You can't be other than who you are, no matter how many people, including Miriam Grossman, tell you otherwise.
And he was also the first.
It's also worth noting that this same kind of conversion ideology is exactly the same thing they thought about gay people. If you just constantly impose from outside this idea that gay people aren't real, or that it's a mental illness you need to be treated from, or whatever, then people just won't be gay. And that's never fucking worked. I mean, if there were any, even a balance between nature and social element, it might be a little bit different, but it's not. There have always been gay people all throughout history because it's fucking innate.
To establish a clinic where you could perform gender reassignment surgeries for people who suffer from gender dysphoria.
He was one of the first in the United States. Again, remember, this is propaganda we're looking at, so every sentence is carefully crafted to mislead the viewer. The way they phrase it is important. Saying he is the first to establish a gender clinic gives this impression that this was not a thing that existed prior to 1964. The newer we make it, the more trendy it seems, and the less backed in actual science it seems to be. That's not how that works. Even if it were brand new, that doesn't mean the science is automatically bad, but it is very much not brand new.
Does anyone know what that is? Yes, Sarah.
It means if you're like born as a boy, but you're actually a girl in a boy's body, right?
Yes, that's correct, Sarah. Very good. And it can also be the other way around, of course.
Again, it's a docudrama kind of thing, so I can almost forgive the teacher character for portraying it this way. Oh, there's only a binary. You can only go from male to female or female to male. Those are the only options. That's not true. It has never been true, and I mean that literally. All the way back to the Talmud, there are genders for non-binary people who don't fit in the binary at all. So this is a thing that's always been known about as well. But it does demonstrate that the script writers, their narrow conception of what gender activists are saying is really, really off base.
I always knew I was really a girl, you know, I so hot, you know, I just went to salon.
Billy.
Huh?
Do you think you're funny?
Who's Billy?
What do you mean, who's Billy?
I'm Becky now.
This is real. Why are you even joking about this?
Yeah, don't be so disrespectful. We're trying to learn here.
Okay, Karen.
Hey. You know, what is...
It's fascinating that this was the portrayal of an over-the-top, outrageously trolly person just a couple years ago. And now it's every fucking Republican. It's just the norm. It's weird how much they tell on themselves in their own propaganda pieces, isn't it?
funny to you might be really serious to someone else. If any of you feel unsure about your gender identity, you should know that it is normal. And we are here to support you.
And that's the gotcha moment where the seed is planted in this character's mind that the
You can tell by the dramatic music, the thump 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 thump. This is the moment that changes everything.
school is there to open a door and make something possible that wouldn't otherwise have been possible, and it gets really, really twisted. But also that little bit with that Billy character, because while it's shouted down, the fact that it's in there, it's a little nod, it's a little dog whistle to the people who, like Ben Shapiro, who seem to think that a person can just put on a wig and a dress and declare themselves to be a woman and then go do horrible things because they are a predator, not a trans person. It's this false equivalency. It's dismissed to say, no, we don't believe that. But the fact they included it when they did not have to is a nod to people like that.
My name is
I have to keep muting because it's getting very loud here. The housemates are coming home and the dogs are barking and going crazy, and they're some of them are on their phones, which of course are on speakerphone at full volume, and they're yelling into them, and because producing maximum noise is the point. So I've had to keep myself on mute. Left-handed Jedi, first of all, member for 23 months. Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying the benefits of membership. Fun fact, even the match level membership includes certain built-in perks that YouTube just includes, such as immunity to slow mode. I don't use slow mode often, but when something is going to be very controversial and there's a likelihood of there being a lot of trolls, I will turn on slow mode so that the mods don't die. But members are immune to slow mode. So, that's one thing I rarely mention because I rarely use it. But when I do use it, that's a superpower that members have. Jedi also says, if I remember correctly, the Native Americans have terms for multiple genders, like six or so. It varies from tribe to tribe. Two-spirit, of course, is just the agreed upon term that most of the tribes have achieved consensus on for what to call non-binary people. But almost every tribe has their own name for it. And it's often very, very different. Also, Mark Reed, member for 29 months, by far, okay, not by far, but like by far, the longest member on this channel. I'm pretty sure that takes us right back to as soon as it was possible to get memberships. I'd have to do some math, but it's really damn close. But thank you, Mark. I very much appreciate you being part of this community, but also supporter for so long. It's awesome. Mark writes, remember, the 5th of November. Which is also a good thing to remember. Yes, we should remember things in November. It's a good day for remembrance, which is why we put the Trans Day of Remembrance in November. Hello, folks who are joining us a little bit later on. I started off with some memorials of the people we've lost this past year, and now we're remembering past Ember, remembering someone else that we lost in a previous year. It's a little meta, but I feel like the representation is kind of important. So that's what we're up to today. Aunt Jer says the longest member. Yes, I realize that there's potential implications there. I don't care to speculate, but in the literal sense, it's true. Mark has been a member longer than anyone else, I believe. I think there were a couple of people who joined at the same time Mark did, but Mark has outlasted all of them. So, yeah.
Miguel Martinez, at the age of, 13, I believe is when she was struggling with depression.
Okay, so this is Andrew's mom talking about pre-transition Andrew. We see we've got the black bars. We're back into the fictionalized narrative where we get the fictional characters who represent Andrew, Evan/Evelyn, depending on where we are, and depression. And we're throwing away the violin. This was once a vibrant, creative child who's now tossing aside all that made them wonderful in favor of these dark things they're learning about at school. And also worth noting that Andrew's mother is still misgendering Andrew.
Hey, how was school, honey?
Fine.
I made your favorite dish.
I'm not hungry.
Ooh, moody teen, darkness ensues.
What she needed was
Teens are never moody. God damn it.
mental health to find out why she was struggling.
So why didn't you get her mental health help? If you're sure that's what she needed, why did you not do that?
When did you start feeling this way?
I look at my brother and everything seems so easy.
Past Ember was reviewing this live. It turns out Andrew did get mental health help. And it turns out it'll surprise you. It'll shock you to find out that the help is to transition. When a trans person is suffering, the only thing that helps. We've tried conversion. We've tried alternative medication. We've tried the medicine we give psychotic people who have actual delusions. None of it works. The only thing that works is to transition, and the mental health professionals know that. So yeah, Andrew did need help with mental health. And the correct medical solution to help with that problem is to transition.
Easy for him. And I just feel confused.
Do you think you'd be happier as a boy?
Maybe.
Mark says, well, it's not a delusion. That's true. Because we've used the same medicines that help with delusions and it had no effect. If it were a delusion, the delusion meds would work. And they don't, because it's not. QED.
You should join this club. I think they can really help you for this.
Probably.
So that was the school counselor, and we're there's a bunch of things tied into this. Remember, we don't have any information about what happened to Andrew, what Andrew went through. This is entirely the script writers and the testimonies from Andrew's mom put together to weave a narrative of what may have happened. So the school counselor in this completely fictionalized incident says to Evelyn, do you think maybe you'd be happier as a boy? Because it's the school who's pushing this stuff. It's not the kids who say, I don't feel right. I feel like, I've always been a boy or a girl or neither or whatever. No. The idea is being put in their head. And we saw Evelyn light up. Maybe. And then the counselor hands her a flyer and says, here, go join this club. Maybe it'll help. It's layer upon layer of bullshit. And it's important to point it out because it's entirely fictional. We have no actual human who was there who can testify to that stuff. It's items from other people's lives being woven in to create this overall narrative.
In about junior high, their bodies are changing and they are.
Christy Lozano, who the hell are you? Well, let's have ourselves a little look.
I had not heard of her before this. Well, clearly I had because I'd looked her up, but I hadn't heard of her before I ran into her in this film. And I don't think she's come up since.
Christy Lozano was a school teacher in the general Santa Barbara area. Here is the Santa Barbara Independent. And she ran for superintendent of schools. Here's Christy's LinkedIn. She was actually a school teacher for 18 years, if this resume is correct. Coastline Christian Academy. But she also ran for public office and failed a couple of times. One other minor detail. Her education is with the Ministry Training College. She got an advanced diploma of ministry in divinity/ministry.
Are so confused by what they are. The most dangerous thing about this culturally responsive curriculum is it trains a child's mind to think a certain way.
Not exactly. The traditional curriculum trains a child's mind to think a certain way. The culturally responsive curriculum, like thinking Black people are human, for instance, that trains children to question these traditional values, which is why the hateful people don't like it. Because that's what tradition is for. Like I said earlier on, the entirety of the private school movement, the homeschool movement, and all these various things are a response to integration. At the bottom of this is all racism and shit. They didn't even care about trans people until they lost on gay people, and they only went after gay people because they lost on black people. It's just hate for hate's sake. They're trying to get some kind of hate to be legal so that they can start knocking down the protective pillars in order to hurt the people they don't like. That's the point. But I digress. Again, this is a very long video, and this is edited down from the original live stream. You can find it in the trans rights playlist here on this channel. But I want to jump towards the end because, I mean, there's so much that could be said. But because I brought this up because it's Trans Day of Remembrance, and I want to, of course, Chloe Cole. I want to get to the end because that's sort of the point. Okay, let's nope, there's still more nonsense. Says Aaron Friday's stickers on her letters. Sex is binary. Only women give birth. A woman is an adult human. All the bullshit. All the bullshit. Okay, I think, well, whatever. This is like within 3 minutes of the end, so probably it's about where we want to be. It may be a little bit further. I may have to go back further, but we're probably in about the right area.
Sexual development are not evidence that sex is on a spectrum. There are no true trans. Only women give birth. A woman is an adult human female. Humans cannot change sex.
It's worth noting this concept of true trans, that comes from the Buck Angels and Blair Whites. You know, the people who've never actually had lower surgery, who talk about you have to have surgery to be a true trans person. They're pick-me's who don't even live up to their own standards, but that's where that sort of thing comes from. You're only a true trans if you've had the surgery. Or it's the no true Scotsman fallacy applied to trans people. That's all that is. But it's the pick-me's who are on the hateful side who say that shit.
Etc. Etc. Don't believe this malarkey that she's a reasonable person just
Past numbers said malarkey. I find that unreasonably amusing.
trying to spread sense. She is an extremist, and she's proud of it. She's just put on a mask of friendliness and rationality, but it's also fun to me that the filmmakers didn't try to hide this. They put this in plain sight.
I know that nothing that I do is going to return my daughter, but at least my hope is to save others.
This is too far. And I thought it might be because there's a little bit of epilogue in the film. So let's go back a bit. We do hear from some other detransitioners throughout the course of the thing. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Jennifer Belek, the Jews are behind it all lady. That's a whole thing. That's a whole fucking thing. Because it's a conspiracy theory. And as I sometimes say, every conspiracy theory is the same conspiracy theory. Young Earth creation, flat Earth, they go back to the Bible is right because the Bible is right. That's their justification. And why? It's oh, fuck's sake. But like with transphobia, it's a very, very clearly Jewish blood libel with a thin veneer painted over it. The Jews are trying to murder our children. Fucking hell. I mean, it would be obvious even if it weren't so blatant, but Jennifer Bilek and Helen Joyce are out here just trumpeting it out loud. They're just saying it. Fuck. But people still take this bullshit seriously. Anyway, not the part I'm looking for. I just wanted to offer that because I was not fully aware of the extent of her nonsense at the time of this original thing. Ah, yes. Robert Galbraith, J.K. Riley. Amazing. Oh, where the fuck is the part I want, though? Okay, this is they're doing the surgeries in the schools. It's not actually in the school, but it's like portrayed as happening during a lunch break. So we do need to go a little bit further. I don't know. We'll take it from here and see what happens.
Around saying, if you don't let us transition, we're going to unalive ourselves. There are trans people who unalive themselves because they're not allowed to live as who they are. It's not the same thing at all. It's not like a cis person saying, if you don't let me live as a cis person, I'm going to unalive myself. It's if you take a cis person and make them live as someone other than who they are, there will naturally be a higher chance of them unaliving themselves because they're fucking miserable.
There's a demand then for it. And
right, there's a big difference. Conservatives portray this high chance of self-harm as a manipulation. If you don't let me have ice cream for dinner, I'm going to kill myself. But that's not really what's happening. It's doctors saying, hey, if you don't give your kids of this vaccine, there's a very high chance they will die of this preventable illness. It's not a threat, it's a warning. Here's a thing that I'm recommending be done for valid medical reasons based on actual science. And if you don't do it, your child could die. That's what's happening. But never mind.
Then the companies, the medical schools, the hospitals, they say, oh, well, look, all this demand, we have to have some emergency use authorization. We have to start doing research. We have to start doing this because it is a mental health crisis among our youth.
No, you're mixing things together. It's not a mental... Being trans is not a mental health problem. You can have mental health problems in addition to being trans. You can have...
Many of us do, because of the bullshit we have to deal with, because we're trans. Or more precisely, because of the way conservatives have trained society to react to us being trans.
Mental health problems as a result.
There was a time in this country, not long ago, when trans people were fucking celebrated. In 1953, Christine Jorgensen was hailed as Woman of the Year because she was the first famous American trans woman. She was a former GI from World War II, and she stayed in Europe so she could get the surgeries she needed. And then she came back with her surgeries done, and people were like, holy shit, she's a gorgeous woman. How did that happen? And people were fascinated. People wanted to learn about it. And she was Woman of the fucking Year in 1953. But tell me how it's only 5 minutes old. Never mind that, though. In 2012, Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine. All that time, 1953 to 2012, trans people were fucking celebrated. We still dealt with a whole lot of shit, but not like today.
Result of being trans and living in a society where people want to, I don't know, eradicate you.
It is all or nothing. Transgenderism must be eradicated.
That's a thing a person said on a stage in front of thousands of people to much applause.
Too much applause. And of course, this is all of a piece. The nationalist Christians, the political appropriation of Bible, but also hatred because of othering, all of the culture war bullshit. It's all for a purpose. And here's a pretty good rundown of how that all works.
I have a problem with this stuff being normalized across the spectrum And specifically, like, why push this on kids? Why introduce this to kids?
I am a depraved wretch. I am a great sinner. I'm a worm, completely undeserving of any love or any grace. I'm nothing. I'm nothing.
You're incapable of being a good person. You're an evil person. You're a terrible person. At the core fabric of who you are. That's why we need laws. We need laws because we're bad people. All of us are bad people.
You can't spell Pride Month without demon. PRIDEMONTH.
If we don't know who the women are, because they are just people, then we won't be able to pull the women up to equality with men.
We have to try to limit the harm. And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. And that's for two reasons. One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those people is basically, a huge problem to a sane world.
Transgenderism must be eradicated.
The LGBT, transgender, grooming our children's minds is a national security threat. We need to hold people for treason, start having some public hearings, and start executing people.
I will use whatever gives me victory. I don't care about the truth, and I don't care about the law. I care about one thing, the control.
But then they rigged the election, and now we won, so I'm going to be your president. Then what happened is they rigged the election, and I became president, so that was a good thing.
I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president, but I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
I just want to say I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes.
It was actually a tremendous blessing to these children for them to be killed and go to heaven and be with God.
We've been hoodwinked. We've been taken in by an ideology crafted by creeps and then pushed on children.
Stop letting people pressure you into thinking.
I want to be ignorant, honestly.
Being a Christian doesn't exclude us from experiencing spiritual dryness.
We're bad people. All of us are bad people.
I agree. They're all of them are bad people. It's all about hate. It's all about control. It's all about, well, like that representative from South Carolina said, killing the right people and cutting taxes. And while it's true, not every Republican is comfortable with that, just like not every German was comfortable with the people they killed. Well, don't let people pressure you into thinking. That's one of the reasons the religion is so very useful to these evil people.
Mom, I realize that no matter what I do, I'm never gonna be like my brother.
But to detransition, there was nothing available. I had to walk in complete darkness alone with one therapist who was.
This is Abel Garcia. Past Ember introduces him. TLDR, he's a detransitioner with a complicated story.
Willing to help me by the same time.
He was all alone with one therapist who was willing to help him. I mean, I do feel for his situation. There is a lack of assistance for people who want to detransition. That's true. Our system should do better. It should do better in helping identify the people who are experiencing other difficulties and cannot access other health care, like the story.
Also worth noting, the vast majority of people who detransition do so for social reasons or financial reasons, being the number two, and retransition as soon as they can and can do it safely. That's not to discount people who aren't trans and detransition because they made a mistake. My heart goes out to those people. But you can detransition the same way you transitioned in the first place. because that's, yeah, but the vast majority of people who do detransition, it's only temporary, and it's for reasons beyond their control.
Story of Daisy that we reviewed previously, who was depressed and had self-harm ideation, but wasn't able to access any kind of mental health assistance. So the only thing she could do, as she put it, was escape her identity into another one that happened to be a transgender person. It's
also worth noting, I've been following Daisy in the years since, and she still posts things along the lines of, I feel like a man. It's really shitty that to be a good Catholic wife, I have to be a woman, because that's not who I am inside. Far be it from me to tell Daisy who she is, but in her own words, she's trans. She's just suppressing the hell out of it for the sake of the people around her, forcing her to be someone she's not. Or so it seems, based on the words she herself said.
Bill saved her life, but it's not the optimal way to go about things. That's not a problem with the trans movement. That's a problem with the way we handle mental health care here in the United States.
It's kind of assumed when these hormones are prescribed to trans people that they're going to stay on it for the rest of their life. None of the doctors I'd ever talked to said anything.
That's not true either. Now, Past Ember wouldn't know, because Past Ember wasn't on HRT. You have to renew it every so often, because even cis people don't stay on hormones their entire lives. That's not how anything works.
About this is what to do if you go off testosterone. I've gone to some dark places, but this was definitely the worst. I could barely get out of bed. It was a lot rougher than I thought it was going to be.
And that's really unfortunate for Kat.
Now, that was Kat Cattinson, who's also gone by Kat Girlson. She has a complicated story too. I introduced all these people earlier on, and a few people I didn't know were in there at the time. I wish we had time to go through the whole thing, but it is a very long video. And again, this is cut down from the original live stream, but I digress. Kat transitioned around age 30, and she uses her experience, and by transition, I mean she took tea for a couple of months. Like, she didn't even make it through her initial 90-day supply. Her voice started to change, and she went, oh shit, I'm a singer. I can't have this, and stopped. But she wants to use that experience to say children shouldn't be allowed access to necessary life-saving medical care, because she freaked out over her voice starting to change on the thing she chose to do as an adult. Amazing.
But why would a doctor do that? That's like if you break your arm and your arm's in a cast, and the doctor says this cast has to stay on for 6 weeks. They assume you're going to keep the cast on for 6 weeks. They're not going to detail to you what's going to happen if you try to take the cast off before 6 weeks. That's not the scope of what they're talking about. Now, if you go to your doctor and you talk to your doctor and say, I want to stop taking testosterone, then your doctor will tell you what's likely to happen, what you can expect. But you have to talk to your doctor, not just go do it.
Mental state was pretty much at its lowest. I often felt very suicidal.
This is Chloe Cole, again, Past Ember introduces her earlier on. She's the grifter that I mentioned earlier, who gets paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to go testify against trans legislation all around the country.
Suicidal. I didn't really know if I was gonna make it.
This is a hard part. If your mental state isn't ready for this, this would be a good place to go make a sandwich and come back later, because I'm going to talk about something that is very unpleasant. What you just saw is exactly what you thought you saw. The other people They laid out how they felt the maximum amount of self-harm ideation at the point where they decided to detransition or what have you. And then it went to a scene of Andrew, Evan in the fictionalized tale, did exactly what it looked like just happened. The real life Andrew stepped in front of a train. I used to have a little sister, and she hung herself. She did not have a good life.
I forgot this part was in here.
She had mental issues that my mother and her father could not handle, and they didn't deal with it very well. And because they couldn't handle her, she spent most of her time when she wasn't in school in her room. I remember when she was 4 years old, I had had a very, very bad day. It's not super important what happened, but I was sitting on a stairway and you know, feeling bad, and this 4-year-old little girl came over and says to me, "Don't cry. It's a beautiful night. The stars are out." She knew I loved the stars. She had a hard time. She didn't have a good life. But she was a sweet kid. The kid's mom and I were still together at the time, and she was about the same age as my oldest. So we took her whenever we could, and they spent a lot of time together, and they played together, and all those fun things. When that happened, there was a lot of hubbub, as often happens. Young teens are very vulnerable to that kind of ideation. I went through a period like that myself for different reasons. I don't think it's abnormal. As we saw the information from the Trevor Project, it's a lot of people have thoughts like that. There was a lot of pressure to find something to blame. Because even though the medical examiner had the week before put out an article in the local newspaper warning people that young teens were at a very, very high risk of self-harm ideation, that same medical examiner wanted to point a finger at someone because, as she told the newspaper, kids don't do that. Even though she herself had pointed out they in fact do just the week before. So, despite the information that was available, there was still a pressure to blame someone. The first instinct was, of course, to blame her father and my mother, because the way she was living, it was harmful, which is why the kid's mom and I took her as often as possible, so that she could have, some periods of normal childhood and, be around people who understood she had atypical behaviors and were able to handle it and accept her anyway. She did it when they weren't home. Unfortunately, my brother was home. So because he was the only person who was there, and someone had to have done it, despite all evidence to the contrary, well, in fairly short order, he found himself in prison. The reason I mention it now is because When a child unalives themselves, there is a tremendous amount of pressure to place blame. And ultimately, that's what this film has been building up to, is Andrew Martinez did unalive himself. And this entire film is intended to place the blame for that on transgender ideology. And it's fucking disgusting.
I've
The entire film. Again, it's very long. You can watch the whole thing in the playlist. But its entire point, including all the hate group members and the grifters and the total lack of actual scientists, all of it is demonstrating the same hateful culture that made Andrew's life so difficult and pushed him to that point, including his mother's reaction and the ways she dealt with him and addressed him and so on. And so that story with my sister is very, very hard because it was a very bad time for a lot of reasons. And part of it was because I lost my whole family. My sister died. My older sister never spoke to any part of our family again because of it. My only other sibling, my brother, went to prison. My mother and father went to jail, which is not the same as prison, but they were still gone. My father had moved away long ago. And as soon as my mother and stepfather got out of jail, they moved to where he was. And then as soon as my brother got out of jail, he moved to where they were. It wasn't this that was solely responsible for the end of my marriage with my 3 older kids' other parent, but it played a pretty big role because it did so much emotional damage to both of us. And I don't blame them for that. They did some other things too that I do blame them for, but it's a complex situation, but this definitely played a role. And so not only did I lose my sister, who was a sweet little kid, but I ended up losing my whole family. The reason I mention it is because people do anything to take blame off of themselves and put it onto something else. We saw it in my sister's case, and we see it very blindingly in Andrew's case. This entire documentary is intended to paint the transgender movement as responsible for Andrew's death. But the story itself shows us their fictionalized version of Andrew's life, shows us, despite all their tampering and all their propaganda and all their pseudoscience, that Andrew was definitely trans. And his mother wouldn't accept him and did everything she could to push him in front of that train. And the society around him, some people tried to help, but not enough people, and not enough. And so that's an important lesson to keep in mind, I think. And one of the many reasons I wanted to re-review this for this Trans Day of Remembrance. A lot of people are going to die in the years to come. The administration and their supporters are hellbound to see as many of us die as possible. When that happens, those of you who try your best to support trans people, to try to, give us a sense of community, a sense of connection. The idea that there are people who don't hate us, or if you do hate us, to hate us for legitimate reasons, like, damn it, Ember, your hats are ridiculous. It's not your fault when that happens. It's because you on your own can't bridge the gap. You on your own can't make up for the vast, overpowering weight of the hatred being thrown at us every day. We appreciate you. We appreciate what you're trying to do, and we appreciate the joy that you do bring into our lives. You make these dark times so much better. And you even make some days that would be blah into good days. And that means a lot. Even for those of us who don't end up sticking around. You can't save everybody. But you can make their life a little better while they're still here. That's all I can do for today. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you again soon. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for October. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Trans Metal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkison, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Kalasia, Lilith, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Godless Engineer, Jester, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, and Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember, or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you all so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark that spreads.